Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Richard. I'm reasonably nervous as this is going to be like a 40-minute sleeping pill, but Richard said, come and talk about leadership, Mark. And I said, well, I don't really know what leadership is. I start businesses. I think something's a good idea, and as you'll see, in the last 10 years of my life, with the theme being try and make a difference to the environment, try and get ordinary people involved in renewable energy. So what I'm going to do, a quick introduction to what I'm trying to do, come all the way back to Leeds, and then have a canter through my life. And I thought the mistakes that I've made and kind of challenges I've come across would be much more interesting than sort of successful business transactions, really. So there's a series of mistakes I'm going to talk about. It's what I do. I hope it's of interest and not too dull. So this is where we get our energy in the United Kingdom. It comes from Mr. Putin, it comes from Azerbaijan, it comes from Africa. It's not straightforward. We import 65% of our energy in this country. And then if you take what we do in the UK, we have a vast central, black is coal, blue is gas, red is nuclear. So we still have a very strong centralised power generation network for our power generation in this country. And so a challenge for us in the renewable energy market is we don't have a grid that's really set up to cope with smaller wind farms, smaller solar farms, smaller tidal arrays. And then when you do want to put a bigger tidal array in, which I'll talk about later, bottom left, Baglan, actually that grid's completely full. So there's a whole reinvestment and reinvention of the network and how we run it. We don't run our network like Germany. But so that's the energy challenge, where it comes from, how much we've got to produce ourselves. 25% of the UK's energy goes offline within the next 7 years. So by 2020, the energy bill will have hit this country. And the government's paranoid. The government doesn't really care about climate change. They say they do. What they really care about is the lights going off in 2016 onwards. And then there's a group of us who see wind, tide, solar as the potential to provide a lot of the new power. 42% of Europe's wind resources here in our country. We have the second highest tidal range in the world. Okay, so why I do it, I sort of have this poster on my wall, just to remind myself that we're sleepwalking as a society towards a 2-degree rise. Science seems to think it's probably going to be higher than a 2-degree rise. A 2-degree rise is dramatic for most countries. We're a temperate country in Great Britain. We won't be that affected by climate change. As you go further north and further south, we can expect floods, famine, migration, a whole host of sort of biblical proportion of bad things. So they say we're 6 meals away from a riot. I thought it was worth noting that energy is so important to the fabric of our society. These are the other posters in my room, just reminding myself the glaciers are going, and they're going at a tremendous rate. And that's what was a sea in North America and now isn't an inland sea. And this is a vision. This is a solar farm that I developed last year just underneath a wind farm, a picture I took on Saturday. And if you will, a vision of a decentralised, locally owned. We had an open day. This is a community share offer. We're raising £4 million for the local community, or indeed anybody in this room. We want ordinary people to start owning the energy mix, and as they do, and as they get a good return, our thesis, my belief, is that we can re-empower society, and we can take away the power out of the big 6 utilities who currently run energy. So that's the overall. I dedicate my life to trying to stop climate change and trying to get ordinary people to own renewable energy projects, because they make common sense. They're much more stable than stock markets and ups and downs of shares, and you can make a difference with your savings. So I started here at Leeds. I did Chinese and Spanish. It was superb grounding. I was able to. All I knew was that what I didn't want to do rather than I did want to do when I left Leeds. But I came from Tavistock in Devon, small market town. I had a roommate who read the comic Viz, and my first engagement with leadership was I stood for student rep, and I said to Gareth, my roommate, "Oh, just write me a poster, will you? I'd like to get elected." So this was my entry into student politics and leadership. Um, and, and it's now 24 years since I left the university, so what you won't know if you weren't here 24 years ago is if you wanted to play for the Leeds University hockey team, you had to wear Hawaiian shorts and outrageous headwear. So this is 1989, I think, in Leeds, and I'm sure there's still an Otley run, and I'm sure there's a... Oh, it's brilliant. I had a wonderful time. Coming out of Leeds with Chinese and Spanish reasonably fluently, I was very lucky that I worked in Taiwan, I worked in China, I worked in Argentina. I set up a horseback expedition across Patagonia that we made into a 5-part television series. I followed what interested me. I knew what didn't interest me was going to work for a bank in Hong Kong, like a number of my peers were from Chinese. And so I went on a sort of voyage of exploration until I was 27 years old, and I was working for 20th Century Fox in the film industry in France, the only French speaker. 150 crew, £28 million budget, and I was earning the same as the kind of gardener greensman. And I thought, I can't work this hard again for somebody else. I'm going to start my own business. So in 1998, I set up my own business. And the reason I talk a little bit about the film stuff tonight is that if there's one industry that's harder to get money raised and to get projects away, I don't know what it is. So it was a lovely grounding for me. And along the way, I learned a whole series of lessons around business, really how not to do it rather than how to do it. And Richard, when you said to me, come and talk about leadership, all I could think of was all the mistakes I made in the film industry. So I thought I'd better give some talks to it. So I raised this money, and I raised the money to fund scripts. So the basis of any good film is a good script. There wasn't a fund in the industry at that stage to fund scripts. Either the studios funded it or there were a few wealthy producers. So I got out the accountant's handbook. I went to the back. I'm semi-ashamed to say I invented a sister in Hong Kong who was coming back with a capital sum and was looking for someone to represent them, and I got introductions to a series of chartered accountants who I then rang back as me and said, would they have clients interested in investing in a film partnership? This was the film partnership. My number one mistake was I didn't pay myself out of it. So I was living off my savings that I'd earned working for Fox and Warners and people. And I did used to own this rather nice flat overlooking the Oval Cricket Ground where I love cricket, so I was able to watch. It was sort of Courtney Walsh, Curtly Ambrose, the end of the West Indies era. That was my flat just there. And one day it became apparent that if I really wanted to go the final yards, something had to give, and the flat gave. And was that a mistake or was that a good call? I don't know. I then went on to make 3 films back to back after that. So it probably was a good call. But I think I was talking to Paul before. The thing that I've not been afraid of is going to it was scary for a few years, but going to the cash point and wondering whether there was any money left on the card. So that notion of if you really believe you'll pull it off. So I sold the flat and ended up making 3 films. But it was, I guess, the story of how the first one got funded. You had to convince the agents that you were going to be around and you were going to be for real, and that it was worth backing this sort of upstart 28-year-old and giving him a good script or enabling him to enter into an option with a good script. But I was fortunate I'd raised some money. The putting together an independent film like this, even with Alicia Silverstone, who was well known at the time, and with Martin Clunes, who was well known at the time, and then Peter and Joan, you still had to find 5 million, and you had to do it through pre-sales, and that meant selling Scandinavia, selling Spain, selling Germany, selling Italy, selling UK. So I think we did 12 pre-sales, a Canadian tax deal. So this country house you see Peter and Joan pictured out is actually in Canada, because the Canadian government would give us 20% of the budget. So the sort of film industry just taught me that, I don't know, I guess it was attritional, but it was dogged, and you learnt to keep going if you thought that you had a good script. We felt that we did. We attracted good stars. And I was very focused on getting it away. I put here on the note focus. What I then did is did 2 films at the same time, which was just ridiculous. I was backed by this man. He's a reasonably well-known financier in London called Guy Hans. I learned an awful lot while dealing with Guy, because I was I was golden boy for a while, and he was big shot London financier, but I mean, I did terrible things. I put contracts and budgets here. I entered into a series of contracts with Guy. I thought I'd filed in my filing cabinet. When the sales started to happen, I went back to my filing cabinet to find my files and couldn't find any of the contracts, and his lawyers weren't able to help me. So I made a lot of paper money in that time, but I guess it might seem really basic, but it's all very well going the first 10 yards and setting everything up and finding the money, finding the stars, getting the 12 pre-sales. If you haven't made sure your own personal ship's in order at the back, yes, you'll get paid a wage, and I got paid a decent wage, but when it comes to the profit participation, you need a hard contract, and Guy taught me a lot, and I'll come back to him. But this is the second film I made. It was called Tabloid. It sold around the world, and I was offered a release in the UK, and someone said it was Momentum Pictures, independent distributor, and they offered us a 20-screen release. And I think I'm right in saying there's about 3,500 screens in the UK, and I thought 20 screens, no, we'll hold out for something better. And a number of accountants in the last 10 years have said to me, Mark, take the money if it's offered. So should have taken the 20 screens. If people go and see 20 screens worth of a film and they like it, next week it'll be on 60 screens. The week after it'll be on 100. We had a good film in the making. I mean, there's an audience this sort of size of all buyers when we came to screen it. But I had an inner hunch, and this is about learning to listen to your inner voice. I felt that the film was 10 minutes too long. When John Hurt came into the film, was 18 minutes into the film, and I just had this nagging thing. You've got to get to John Hurt by 10 minutes in. You've got to get to him. And I didn't act on it because I was scared of going back to Guy and saying, Guy, I need another £300,000, please, to finish this film, to cut out the 10 minutes, to redo the music, to redo the edit. And so to this day, if you, well, you won't watch the film, but if you were to watch the film, you watch it from minute 10 in, because then it gets going. And then the focus thing, it was ridiculous. We were filming Global Heresy in Canada. I was taking the overnight flight back from Canada to land in London, to do a day at Ealing Studios, to get back on the 9 p.m. flight back to Canada. And so two quite good films could have been much better if they'd been loved more. And I've come to see that a more tightly defined focus that you love a lot will reach fruition. But I was learning at the time. This was the final film of the three. We did very well. We got a good release through Lionsgate. Mr. Hands and I had an editorial disagreement as to how it should go. So we ended up with articles like this, whereby the Sunday Times said, "Well, what's happened to this film that's meant to be coming out, has been meant to be coming out for the last 2 years?" And what had gone on is I made the mistake of firing the director and not telling Guy Hands in the edit. And then he just said, right, Mark, I've had enough of you doing things before you tell me. Keep your finances informed, keep them informed, and tell them again. So I look back now and think, how naive was it to not tell a man that had written a £4.6 million cheque that the guy who was in the edit, and it was the right call to get rid of Stephen, because he was losing the humour out of the film, but it was an utterly ridiculous thing to do. To tell a reasonably paranoid man who was at his holiday home in Hawaii, I've got rid of the director, but not tell him so that he found out through a third party. So this, I guess these are just obvious things, but they taught. I was wrapped up in that picture up there. This is on the island of Taransay. This is taking 185 people to an island. All of these pictures, all of these houses aren't houses. They're a film set. All of that jetty was built by us. We found 1930s and 1920s boats from around Scotland and asked them to sail around one particular promontory one particular afternoon. But the grounding that the film industry gave me was everything was possible, and you couldn't ever take no for an answer. So what was needed one day? Oh, shall I tell this story? Okay. So I had a film. It was called It was called Monkey Face, and Michael Douglas agreed to be in it, and his wife Catherine agreed to be in it, and Stephen Frears, who's a reasonably well-known UK director, good director, agreed to direct it. and a guy called Mark Aldesky, who was Fine Line, whose star was this high because he'd said, I think Lord of the Rings is a good idea to make into a film, Peter Jackson, and I'll make all three of them, not the one that every other studio had said. So Mark Aldesky's star was very high, and Mark said, would you like £52 million, Mark, $52 million, sorry, Mark, to make a film? I like this cast, I like this director. And I said, yeah, that'd be great, let's go. And then Edie Samahar, who's a crook, who had a deal with Warner Brothers, said, Michael, let's make this film for $55 million and you can have $3 million more. Michael was earning $18 million on the film, Catherine was earning $9 million. And Michael I could have persuaded Michael to go for 18. And I didn't get on the plane. And I left it with his manager in Los Angeles, and basically the deals in Hollywood happen and they're live and they're mustard hot for about 6 weeks. And all I had to do was get on a plane, and my inner voice said, Mark, go and act. Do not do anything. Go and see Michael. You know, you've got his number. Ring the bloke up. Go and see him. Take charge. Yes, he might be a big star and you might be slightly in awe of him, but that's the only way this film's going to happen. I didn't go. And Stephen Frears, the director, backed out, and then Catherine decided she didn't want to do it. And then Michael decided he didn't want to do it, and then Hugh Grant said he did want to do it, and then somebody else dropped out, and stuff ebbs. So anyhow, my assistant Mael said I had to tell that story. So there I am in the film industry, and I wasn't interested enough to get on the plane, really, probably is true. And I read an article in the Guardian newspaper. It said, largest wind farm in Europe to be built in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. It was on page 3. I can remember it to this day. A penny just dropped inside me. I'm going to do that. I'm going to develop wind farms. Really lucky, because the UK government had introduced the renewables obligation in April 2002, and that article, I must have been reading it in summer 2002. And so there I am doing the Michael Douglas thing, but suddenly I feel like, so you've got everybody in society saying, isn't it interesting what you do, Mark, with films, and asking questions about what's Michael Douglas's house like. And I'm over here going, I'm really interested in going to do wind farms on the Scottish hillside. And so to me, it was a sort of no-brainer. I went to do wind farms on the Scottish hillside. And I'm really lucky, because the renewable obligation had come in, and large utilities are not good at looking after landowners. And so they had made a series of offers under the old non-fossil fuel obligation contracts to landowners, which then meant that only the top best wind speed site happened, and the other 6 got canned. And so the utilities had just signed up everybody and then done 1 out of 7. So big landowners didn't want to really talk to utilities. We were able to come along, and it was almost like, after all the attrition of the film industry, you start doing something you really believe in. The first 3 people I met for lunch in the film industry after that, I said, I'm starting a wind farm company, and they all said, can I invest? The third bloke said, would you like to meet... He'd been in a business with Felix Dennis, the publisher, and Felix had bought one of their businesses. And so Rob Lewis. Rob was wealthy. He said, would you like to come and meet my friend Rob? I said, yeah. So I met this friend Rob. Rob said, I'll put some money in. Would you like to meet my business partners? We'll put some money in. And they backed this kind of callow 32-year-old who only knew how to make films to go to Scotland. We signed up 72 parcels of land in a year. We were just very lucky with our timing. A sort of lesson, I'm pretty confident that I could pull it off with common sense wind, and I allowed myself to doubt myself and bring in a couple of guys UK guys who'd been doing wind in America, and they were awfully staid and awfully ponderous in how they went about things. And there's a time and a place for both, but I think if at the stage in that market, looking back, I'd have been better to keep management tighter in my own. Business that you set up is in your own kind of the way you are as an individual. So attracting and putting people into that business that either are a counterpoint to you or share a vision, I think is quite powerful. Yes, you need the people to say no to you. At the same time, you need to share a combined interest and desire to make a difference. So we built some wind farms. You were saying how to put it together. I mean, it was. So this wind farm, there was choices. It was 2006, and there was choices. Do we go out and raise more money for this wind company? What happened is we had 2 wind farms on the west coast of Scotland, and we had transmission bonds, back all the way to the top graph of how the transmission lines work in the UK. The best wind is in Scotland, it's in the north and the northwest of Scotland. There's some great wind in Aberdeenshire, but on the west coast there's no grid. And Scottish and Southern came in and asked us for a £450 million transmission bond, which we negotiated down to 1 million in the end. But they came in with this headline figure, and we thought, how on earth can we do that? We're a little business that's raised money from 87 shareholders, friends and family, wider and wider and wider, with a portfolio of 960 megawatts. But do you then go and raise money from more individuals? Do you do a deal with a biggie? Scottish Power made us an offer. Apax, the private equity company, made us an offer. Or do you sell the company? So we sold part of the company, and so it's a good. In one sense, it's great because it pays for a nice house and it gives you a stable background for life. And the investors made 13.5 times on their money, so that, it's a good business story. But then the rest of the assets ended up with this American coal-fired power company, AES. And if there's ever a slower-moving, monolithic organisation, I don't know it. Because the utility mindset, people who go to work for utilities who think the way the utilities are just that. They're making sure they can pay a sensible 6-8% return to investors once they've got involved. So there's an argument that says if you sell a transaction too soon, yes, you take cash off the table, and that's great. But on the flip side, this business would have been worth so much more 2 years later had you not done the exit to the coal-fired power company, who wasn't particularly interested in renewables. So just a reflection, really. So then what do you do? I was taken by a beardy man called David Hurst. I was sitting in a drinks do in London, and David said, I've got this clever fridge freezer piece of software. I said, David, how does it work? And he said, well, basically I can take an entire coal-fired power station of 600 megawatts off the grid forever. So that sounds interesting, David. How does it work? Oh, well, I've invented this software and this chip, and you put it in fridges, and I've got Electrolux interested in doing it, but my problem is I haven't got any money. But we've modelled it with the national grid, and we can show that instead of having a coal or gas-fired power station, so there's always a coal or gas-fired power station spinning, as we sit here today, in case there's an event somewhere, in case you need quick power. And David's thesis was, let's take that off the grid. And he asked me, could I introduce him to investors, people who'd invested in wind energy? I said I could, but at the same time it struck me that potentially, this is now 2006, there was a need for a fund that could specialise in early stage investment. And so I thought, well, I better set one up. And I didn't know anything about funds, I didn't know anything about the city, but I could see a need. I could see a need for putting management teams around people like David, who had brilliant ideas. I mean, his gizmo is now in many Sainsbury's stores and a bunch of data centres, and the National Grid have accepted it. And he can bid he can bid response contracts, whereby when the grid needs quick power, and he can bid them from a bank of fridges and air conditioners now in supermarkets. So one of the most thrilling things of setting up this fund is that stuff like that is now out there that would never have been backed. So how to go about it? You said to Richard to talk about it. I tried to find other people who were a counterpoint to me, who had experience in energy efficiency or had experience in micro renewables. I tried to find brokers here, ABN AMRO, way back before the hubris of ABN. They're Dutch. It was fortunate. Their Dutch board had said, let's go and make some investments in the UK in environmental stuff. And ABN AMRO wrote a 20 million quid cheque, and it was just because the main board had 4 weeks earlier said, let's go and try and find an environmental fund to back. So that was good. But then what happens is, once you've got this money, and we raised £45 million, and we had a reasonably decent thesis about we were going to back green buildings, we were going to back energy efficiency, so that you had building management control systems and lighting management and clever lighting and sort of companies that would reinforce each other. Yeah, the flip side of this pressure, which I wasn't good at withstanding it back then. I could withstand it now, but back then, the brokers just wanted us to spend the money. Spend it, spend it, spend it. When can we raise you more money? When can we raise you more money? And it doesn't make for good investment decisions, because you're being hurried out the door with the money. How can you, it was how to spend £40 million a year as quick as you could so that they could go and raise you another 60 million. And the comparison they were always giving us is, well, our hedge fund clients, we've raised 300 million for, and we were this diddy little 40 million fund. So I think we had pretty good clarity. But hubris again, you know, I look back and think, well, we didn't stand up to the brokers, and we trusted too much the management teams. And Steve and myself, who'd set it up, didn't have a good counterpoint. We didn't agree together that we would only make investments that both of us were prepared to sign off on. And there's this real power in having a business partner who's and Steve's a steady Eddie, quantum physicist, commercial guy with Pursuit Dynamics on his CV, which is a very, very successful AIM-listed stock around energy efficiency in processing. And Steve and I are a great counterpoint. That we're a good team together, but we allowed each other to just do the investments that we wanted to do, rather than actually only do investments that each other were supporting. So it's just a piece of learning, really, and I wish we'd been more focused, looking back now, on really amazing management teams, because there is no replacement for 2, 3 or 4 brilliant people in a business who are utterly focused on trying to deliver that business. And I was probably very focused on trying to raise the next fund, because I'd started to go and see investors, and they would say to me, Mark, this is really high risk. Our job is to look after people's money. We don't think there should be an allocation at the top of their pyramid that they have with VC right at the top and gilts and bonds right at the bottom. It's sort of gilts and bonds and property and stocks and shares and private equity, and right at the top of their thesis used to be venture capital. I don't think venture capital will get a look in now. I'd started to think about wind energy and the returns of a wind farm, and I started to think about the nature of pension investments and the nature of what the city does. And in a sense, my view is that the city has our money collectively, and its job is to stay ahead of inflation and make sure there's enough money there in 10, 20, 30 years' time when you want it again. So the idea of investing in a highly volatile stocks and shares, and we were a highly volatile stock and share, didn't seem to match with actually the requirements of what I think the city should be doing, which is maintaining people's value of their hard-earned money that they've put into their pension and savings. So I started to have a debate with myself, really. I won't talk much about this. This was the notion of a more stable fund that just invested into projects, and then in terms of talking to the pension funds, I started talking about hydro projects, tidal projects, solar projects, and I tried to watch people's eyes. When would this pretty staid fund manager's eyes light up? And they didn't light up so much on wind. Whereas when we started in 2006, everybody was chasing the 30% return. Suddenly, here we are in 2009, and everybody just wants to keep their money safe. And so the world is starting to join up with the idea that why can't we just invest in stable assets? So I went to see 135 pension funds. So it's another of those, I think we ought to go and do something and then go and do it, I suppose, is what I did. Went to see 135 pension funds, got a series of commitments, and then the stock market started to rise. And commitments of 80 million went down to 30 million in the space of 2 weeks. And Neil Woodford is Invesco. He has £1 billion worth of people's ISA money coming each year, and he said, sorry, Mark, I had allocated 30 million to you, but the stock market's rising. I think I'm going to put the money into stocks and shares I already know. I can make more certain money out of that and a quick return. And so the stocks and shares guys pulled out. And we had to do a whole new fundraiser around the insurance groups, and then Prudential funded the whole piece and put 200 million in. But again, it brought back to me that the stocks and shares world is a very opportunist world. Trade in, trade out, trade in, trade out. And those guys make great money trading in and trading out, but is it really the instrument for our own personal savings? My conviction has increasingly been that, I'll come to that in a sec, my conviction has increasingly been stable operating cash flows from renewable energy projects is a place where we collectively should have our savings. I wanted to just sort of talk a little bit about balance in life, really. So I found as I started to practice a bit of meditation, as I started to sort of teach myself to don't just listen to your brain, listen to your body. If your body feels uncomfortable, you shouldn't be doing that deal. So I started to practice. California, right, land of the fruit and nut when you go into the film industry, but there's some great things, and there's some guys, sitting there meditating on the beach in Santa Monica that you start to meet. So this is kind of my breather. I thought I should do a couple of slides about where I think life is best led as an entrepreneur, because as an entrepreneur you're always pushing and you're always trying to open new doors and new avenues. So This is the bluebell wood behind my home. This is the cowslips in our field at home. This is a picture from my daughter that I said I would put in the presentation. And I just think life is about balance. And so part of my being able to do what I do is to be able to walk through this wood and think about what I'm doing next and does it make sense. And so into the story of solar. So we've been doing solar in Spain and had a certain expertise. And friends would say, well, Mark, the feed-in tariff's coming to the UK, you're surely going to do solar in the UK. And I would laugh. And I'd say it rains in the UK and it's cloudy in the UK, and I know solar is generating by light. But then they'd start to say, but look at the load. All the retail guys, all the offices, all the universities, all using load during the day when solar's on. If you get enough solar, you can start to do what Germany's done. 3 weeks ago, Germany generated 52% of its energy from the sun on that 3 or 4 days where it was very, very sunny. And they are on the same latitudes as ourselves. And so I formed a UK development business as the next business. I'll put in here, it's still run partners and percentages. I think when you go on a journey, you just got to be very careful about who you go on a journey with. And I've got better at valuing myself. I've got better at bringing people with other skill sets that complement your own with me. But for anybody setting up a business, don't do what I did with the film industry and set up with a guy who talks good talk but actually doesn't do anything. You want doers around you. You want people who are dedicated to whatever you're trying to do. And here we've got a little passionate team. We wanted to make a difference. We wanted to get solar farms built. We saw there being actually a genuine matching with the Sainsbury's load and the Tesco's load and that daytime load. So let's put some solar on the grid. And then this man, Greg Barker, said, I think it's going to cost us too much money and we've got the spending cap. And so I'm announcing a sharp reduction in the fit taxes on February the 7th, last year. So on February 7th, I get invited to a meeting with Mr. Barker, and we sit around in a desk that's just off that shot, and he says, I've come to tell you that we're reducing the feed-in tariff from August the 1st. It's no longer going to be 29p, it's going to be 8p. And you put the arguments to the minister and you say, but minister, it takes 9 months to get a grid connection, it takes 4 months to get switchgear. Solar panels are probably okay. Ordering the steel for the frames for solar panels is going to take us some time. You know, how do you expect us to build stuff? Well, I'm expecting you to build it under a future tariff. We can see a tsunami of solar farms coming, he said. It's a slightly unfortunate timing we watched then happened, but we see a tsunami of solar farms coming, and we don't want them at this price. And I suppose looking back now, I have a certain sympathy. However, having taken in £5 million worth of investors' money, your job is to give that money back first and foremost, and then to make them a return. So basically, we were looking at something that we had 14 months to do something in, we had to do it in 4.5 months. We did. We raised 68 million quid in 3 weeks. And really, so the old low carbon accelerator shareholders were the lovely pension funds in this country, South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, East Riding, people who spend ordinary people's money, and you sit in the dole queue when you go to see them to present what you're doing with your fund. And they pledged a load of money into our solar farms, and then they couldn't invest because they couldn't take the timescales. You had to be connected by August the 1st, put a buffer in, you had to be connected by July the 15th, and Greg Barker had said on February the 7th, your 9-month process hasn't got a chance, you've got to connect. By chance, I got hold of this man, Ricardo González Díaz, who'd funded 165 megawatts worth of solar farms in Italy and Spain, based in Madrid. And Ricardo said, look, I understand risk. I know you've done wind before, Mark. What's the status with the grid? Can you get us connected? Will your investors, so new investors had backed me. They put £5 million in. And then he said, will your investors put £6 million in if I put £30 million in? So I went to Exeter, where our funders are based, asked them if they would commit with £6 million. Ricardo committed to £30 million. By this time I'm knocking on every door I can think of tax-based funds in London, other pension funds, wealthy people who might have done property, because I thought there was a correlation between property and renewables. And between those three pots, we were able to build these parks in rapid time. So this is a picture. The cows is William Manuel in St Austell. That's the China Clay Works. That's the drying sheds. And we were looking for, my view about solar parks is they should be hidden. You should never be able to see them. They should be up a country lane, out of sight, next to something industrial, on poor agricultural land, chucking out power unobtrusively. And you know, we got 19 planning permissions last year. So the picture is on October. We started on site on May the 17th, and on the right-hand picture on June the 22nd, we energised. And people just worked the socks off. We worked so hard for so many weeks. But you got to the stage now where next week Santander will sell their interest in the solar parks to HSBC's infrastructure fund. They'll make an enormous amount of money. And we'll have got some first renewable projects built, and then they came back and said, Mark, would you be interested in taking our funding for another set of projects? So this year there's 120 megawatts worth of projects, again, building solar farms, which then, so that's fine, and you build the solar farms, you put them in as an asset into the pension funds, and they're lovely stable cash flows. For 25 years they'll throw out money, and you know exactly what they're going to throw out because you know how much the sun's going to shine each year. But I guess my sort of dream is, this is West Mill. So we funded this solar farm completely differently. It was funded by Mark Healy and by our funders. Mark Healy's family developed the Meadowhall Shopping Centre in Sheffield. And he and his brother Paul are interested in starting to put some of the family money to work in renewables. And he had a sort of minder guy, Mark Edworthy. And I got a phone call when I was going to Germany one night saying, Mark, I hear you've got some solar farms to fund. I've got £30 million. Would you be interested in us funding one of your solar farms? And it was just when I was doing knocks on the door, and he just go, thank goodness the universe is looking after you, because you just go banging on doors and seeing where you can get. And I said, well, the solar farm I'm struggling to fund is this solar park here, West Mill Solar Farm, because Adam Twine, who's the farmer, wants it to be owned cooperatively, and I share that vision as a lovely way to do a share offer to ordinary people. So that's what we launched this Saturday. I put a sign up on the bottom of here, but I want ordinary people to be able to own renewable projects. That's where I'd love the world to go. So this is our proof of concept. We're looking to raise £4 million. Got to close it by the 31st of July. £250 minimum investment, £20,000 maximum investment, and you know, every time you put £1,000 in, and there's £60-70 that come out in a dividend each year. And they're really lovely, safe ways to put your money. It's not like a cash ISA. I don't know. I can't remember if I put the slide in. So this is sort of the returns that you get on a cash ISA offered in the high street at the moment, and then the idea that we would do an ISA as the next step after the public launch, but paying 8%. So you're doing good with your money. You've got safe, stable returns because you've got no feedstockers, you've got no gas price, no coal price, no way you're going to get the nuclear elements from. And where do you spend this money? I mean, this was just the Financial Times fund management piece from Monday. And name after name after name after name of fund after fund after fund after fund. But they all invest in stocks and shares in different countries, different jurisdictions. But seldom do you see stuff that's actually doing what I think you should be doing with individuals' money, which is saving it. So I call it the fog. You don't know how to penetrate it really. So that's a piece I'm trying to do now. Is we are piecing together a team. We're testing whether there is real appetite in the world to own renewables, as all of us as individuals, as a way to save. And I guess doing the same thing as before. Set an intent, decide you're going to go and do it, and try and put a team together to deliver it, really. And then, I might add a bit more time. Can I talk about the lagoon then? Yeah? Okay, so this is Swansea Bay. That's the city of Swansea. This is 9.5 kilometres of sea wall. This geophys under here is the seabed and what it looks like. And the idea is that this is a giant swimming pool, and we fill it up with the tide every day, and we empty it with the tide every day. The Severn Estuary is the second highest tidal range in the world after the Bay of Fundy in Canada. This lagoon can power this entire bay, so that's got Port Talbot in it, that's got Swansea in it, so it's generation where people can live. We can do a local tariff, which will therefore which will undercut the cheapest tariffs in the market by paying out a percentage of the profits from the lagoon. There's a river there, the Towie goes up to the left, the Neath goes up to the right, so we don't block any fish. The marine mammal people think we're fine where we are. Countryside Council for Wales are our biggest statutory consultee, followed by the Environment Agency. They're supportive. Swansea City Council likes the idea of a new cycling promenade coming round the front. I'm sort of there I am as ever. We've spent about 800,000 of our own money, and now we have to go out to ordinary people. Say to some of my old backers in wind energy probably, but would you like to fund the 4 million it'll take to get it to planning? And then interestingly, build it and they will come. I've started to have calls from private equity funds already saying, we understand you're doing a tidal lagoon. We'd like to know more. And these are guys who can only deploy sort of hundreds of millions. And so we go again, and it's a very basic idea. There's 705 tides a year. The water fills up, it empties. 5 Olympic swimming pools worth of water go through those turbines every second. And tidals, hydro, it's simple. It's the head, gives you a flow, and that amount of power is then calculated. I think I've got a chart. So we know exactly the depth of our lagoon. We know therefore exactly how much water is going to be in it, and therefore we can tell the grid exactly how much power is going to be coming out of it every day. We build it like this, and I guess this is the other entrepreneurial piece, is we went to Korea, Malaysia, Florida, India, Angola to see bunds that have been built in the sea the way that you don't build them in the UK. So this is a UK standard core, sand core breakwater, but the Department of Energy and Climate Change and the one utility Empower that's looked at this has looked at building this out of rock. You build this is a cross section of the impoundment wall. You build this out of rock, it costs £36 million a kilometre. If you build it out of geocontainers, which is dredging the sand, so we dredge the sand here, so here you pull a square kilometre of sand out, you fill it into enormous bags. These are sort of pillows at the length of this lecture hall, and you get the cost down. Van Ord, who built most of that ridiculous stuff in Dubai, in the islands and stuff, we're down at 14.5 million now, and the Department of Energy and Climate Change told us we couldn't get lower than 26 million. So again, we've just gone for it. We've said that this common sense is that if you've got a coastal protection bund in Australia that costs 600,000 Aussie dollars, and the rock cost a million too, surely we're going to be able to do the same here. So we're pushing this forward. We want to do, this was our proof of concept, Korea, 9.1 metre tidal range, 3.1 metres of bridge has been built by the Koreans, and we went to see the Koreans and say, how did you do this, and could you do it again? This is me blaring on really. This is the certainty of the tides. That's 2007, exactly how much water you get, therefore you know exactly how much power you're going to get. There's some turbines. And there's the exciting piece for tidal range in this country. I started this talk by showing the kind of grid map. I talked about how we import 65% of our energy. The tide times are those across the country, and therefore you can get constant base load from the tidal range in these islands. And we have this unique resource. We've worked out how efficient the turbines need to be, and have got there. We've worked out bunds are that. So now we go through the environmental consenting. But the vision is there's 10,000 megawatts of applicable spaces here. So we're cracking on. Helped in part by these people. So again, it's just about the journey around the world and deciding not stopping until you can find somebody. This is Dr. Vladimir Krcan on the right, and he's a Croat in Slovenia at the ex-Yugoslavians Turbine Institute, which is the foremost research centre in the world, and there he sits, and most British companies don't go to him, but the Dutch have found him, and the Germans have found him, and the Chinese have found him. And so he's designing special turbines that can cope with the flow of the water as it comes in and the flow of the water as it goes out. You can always make it look like a dam, which is when the water's going out, but he thinks he's got to 82% efficient on the way in. So we'd have a circa 85% efficiency with the rise and fall of the tides. So I guess my conclusion was, when you asked me to do it, I think I'm starting. When we went to Westmill on Saturday, I bumped into two of the guys that I work with, and I said, I've got to give this speech. What would you say? And they said, well, it's about inspiration and passion, and we love working where we work, doing these solar farms, because you're passionate about what we're trying to do. It's inspiring to try and make a difference, and you're clear about what we're trying to achieve. So for me, the leadership piece you asked about, Richard, is just, let's be clear about what you're trying to do. Let's make sure it's achievable. Surround yourself with really tremendous people, and then get cracking. I think that's me done. Is that okay?
Mark, thank you very much indeed. We've got time for questions, and so questions from the floor now. Yeah.
Quick question, Mark.
Chris.
Your Tidal barrage project, did you know Catherine Jones comes from Swansea?
I did, yeah, and I've got Alan Burry, who's her manager's name in my book, and I'm keeping going, when do I call Alan to get Catherine to say it's a good idea, but I'm not going to do it right yet until I know exactly the cost of my caissons. So the piece I didn't talk about was that the bit that you put the turbines into sits on this lip. And the sheer amount of water coming in means you've got to make sure that this caisson never budges in the water. It doesn't slide. And we're just figuring out with Costains the cost of that and how we build it. So that's our last red flag to get over. Then Alan Burry's getting a call, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I've not made as many mistakes as you, except just over a year ago, which I put 6.5 rather than 4 kilowatts on my roof. But how does fit? Obviously, you're not going to make the same sort of return as if this stuff happened a year ago before things were stopped. So, solar on an industrial scale is going to pay that much less. Is it going to make money per se, or is it that you're almost hedging against the gas and electricity prices via other means, and that's where the return comes rather than the fit rate, which is down about a quarter of what it was a year ago.
So what we'll do is we'll build under the rock and not the fit. And currently there's 2 rocks for solar. So effectively it's about an 8.75p fit. 20 years, not 25 years. So if you can stay in the southwest, you can do Pembrokeshire, Devon, Cornwall, Dorset, South Coast, Isle of Wight, little bit round to East Anglia. You can get about 1,000 sun hours. And with 1,000 sun hours and 2 rocks, we're getting about 9.5% return. And the pension funds are saying anything now. The lovely thing of this sort of journey into the nether regions of pension funds is that 5 years on, this year is the first year that they've called us and said we have money to deploy in renewables, particularly solar. If it's making 8%, we're interested. So we can hit that 8%. So the cost of the panels is still dropping. We're expecting the government to now drop the rock banding to 1.5, 1 3/4 rocks. But the lobbying we've done with government is to say, you're really interested in government in getting pension and insurance long-term money into infrastructure, not just renewables, but wider infrastructure as well. There is a wall of money that wants 8% return. So as long as you keep our tariffs at 8% and we drop the tariff in line with the cost of panels, we pay £1.18 per watt for the panels that you saw in the picture that we built last year. Our latest offer is 53 pence now for panels, by buying them in bulk and buying 30, 50 megawatts. So there's an economy of scale thing, but there's just the sheer macroeconomics of panel price coming down. So yes, pensions are buying it for long-term stable cash flows.
So I just wonder if there's still money to be made as other mine.
Yeah, if you're happy with 8%, I mean the guys that were wanting their 14s and their 16%, that's gone.
Yes.
When you set up your first business, what would you say was the greatest challenge?
I think when you set up the first one, you're not worried about all the things that are going to go wrong. So I was more worried about money and money lasting. So I'd got the money that I'd earned for the last year, and that was my nest egg. And you needed to make that last long enough to such time as you could bring some money in to back you, because you've got no experience, you've got no track record, and you're on force of personality really, and hopefully some sort of clear vision of what you're trying to do. So I think I was most worried about money. It doesn't necessarily answer the question. The most challenging was possibly getting because you're trying to engage with agents who are naturally sceptical of anybody who's a sort of wannabe film producer. So it's overcoming most people's scepticism that either they're going to look stupid by dealing with you, or you're going to waste their time. So it's trying to pierce that and have them see, okay, it looks like you are intent on carrying on. This is perseverance. Just knocking on that same door. There was an agent called Sue Rogers who was the writer's agent, And it took 8 months to persuade Sue Rogers that actually I wasn't going to go away, and I did really like that script, and I was interested in taking an option on it. And in the end, they then raised the bar really high. So rather than an option which you might have for say £1,000 or £2,000, they said it's a £30,000 option. Prove that you've got some money. And fortuitously, the two original backers, a guy called Jamie Bond and Guy Hans, had not many weeks before had written me a cheque. So again, I suppose I've had a great belief that if you do push, lady luck does come a little bit in your way. So that other details get worked out for you if you're really clear about what you're trying to do, and you do get tested. You've got to keep pushing that extra week, that extra month, that extra phone call, and suddenly the doors start to open. So it's perseverance, probably.
Yes.
With respect to the Tidal Lagoon project, what hurdles have you yet to overcome before it actually becomes a reality?
So the government set up this thing called the Infrastructure Planning Commission for all major projects. They set it up really for nuclear, for Hinkley Point and any other of the big new nukes. And so we have to go into this very staged 15-month legal process. So we've spent a year and a half commencing our bird surveys and our fish surveys and our marine mammal surveys and our coastal sand movement surveys and these kind of things, and building models around it. The task is really to build the political support, and I mean political with a small p, so the local residents association, the local angling society, the local Friends of the Earth group, all the way up to Swansea City Council. And if we can build that support, we hope that the due process that we have to go through with the Infrastructure Planning Commission is a series of steps. But we have to do a 15-month series of steps commencing next month that we can't concertina.
There's a question at the back. Yeah.
Yeah, just following on from that, I mean, how do you go about building that public support, and how does that the risk of that sort of feed into the investment?
Yeah, so it's a kind of conviction thing. It's saying, I think this is a good idea, let's push it. And then you do your sense check. And we started with the people that we thought were really key. So the Chief Executive and the Chairman of Countryside Council for Wales. So they're the English nature, if you will, of Wales. They look after all natural heritage. We went to see the head guy at the Environment Agency. We went to see the First Minister in Wales' energy advisor, and we went to see Swansea City Council and Neath Port Talbot City Council. So we started with the people that we thought would really have a problem. And ABP, because they own the port, and we're blocking navigation. We're completely shutting off navigation between Swansea Port and Port Talbot Port in a direct line. You now have to go round the lagoon once built. So we went to see all of those and said, what do you think? Do you see any problems? And they were lovely. We've got a series of testimonials of people saying, this couldn't happen more soon, and we'd love to see this happen. And so then we drop down a level, which is, that's Port Tennant just there above the docks, then it's St Thomas, and it's Mount Pleasant. And we went residents association by residents association around the bay, sort of meeting, said, can we come and present our plans? Anybody that was a development trust, anybody that might be a cyclist, an angler, a water, something on water, rowing, sailing, kite surfing, and tried to see all those associations. Swansea City Supporters Trust, Osprey Supporters Trust. We have a list of about 110 organisations in Swansea and Neath Port Talbot, and we've been ringing them up and saying, can we come and see you? And we've got to, I think we've met about 55 of them now, and so far no one's blown a raspberry apart from the anglers. But just by continually filling the diary, I've got a lady who just fills diary with meetings, and and there's three of us that then go to those meetings.
A couple more questions. Yes, certainly.
You've been very focused on obviously solar and wind and tidal, but how do you rate the return prospects for other renewables such as biomass, for example?
Okay, so biomass. It's funny. I think you find your way towards things that attract you. So biomass. Whilst we're putting in a biomass boiler at home, I haven't really looked at it. It hasn't sort of caught me inside me to want to go and do biomass. So it seems to be sensible from the outside looking in. The RHI would seem that gives you a little kick. It would seem to be very good if you're putting it into a school, into somewhere that's got a swimming pool, into somewhere that's got a sort of decent hot, medium to low temperature hot water load. So it would seem to be sensible. I don't know very much about it. On the other renewables, hydro, I like a lot, and pumped storage I like a lot, because I see pumped storage as having a balancing capacity to sit alongside the solar and the wind. And hydro, because again it's well understood in terms of its returns. Less I'm a bit more bearish about wave and tidal stream, because I think that's technology innovation, and there's probably another 5 or 6 years of technology innovation. And if we are to shift to a distributed generation future, and if we are to shift away from some of the big, the next generation of dash to gas, then it is in the next 7 or 8 years where the bigger generation is going to come on. So and the government likes biomass. So the government are going to push biomass and offshore wind. We're going to say tidal lagoons have got a place alongside offshore wind. And we're going to be pushing the distributed generation, so a 10 megawatt solar farm here, a 3 megawatts of hydro there, and smaller biomass heat supply. It becomes part of the mix. It's trying to open up government to a wider distributed future where it's owned by more of us and more spread out across the country.
Yeah, so do you see biomass as smaller scale in that sense?
Well, I worry about bringing biomass in from Vancouver Island to burn in Bristol Port, which is what's going on at the moment. And I look at Santander, our funders, rubbing their hands with glee. They're funding a 180 megawatt biomass plant, and I went, what's the feedstock worry? Oh, it doesn't matter, we've got that 15-year long-term feedstock from West Canada. So the idea of shipping it over from West Canada, that they can still make their 17% return, to me sort of sticks in the craw when you say, well, we've got good wind and we've got good hydro and we've got good tidal range here locally to us, why should we import it? To me, it's no different from importing gas or oil.
Yeah, I see. I was thinking more in terms of waste.
Oh, waste, brilliant.
Waste products.
Yeah, and then you've got, but you've got your issue that the road to hell is littered with gasifiers. So you've got to find the right boiler that will work, especially if you're putting paint on wood and stuff like that in there.
I promise one more question. Is there somebody who wants a burning question? Yes.
Can I just ask, for your community projects, are you using cooperative model or PLC?
So this one is a cooperative model. So it's a one member, one vote, maximum £20,000 investment, cooperative board, making decisions, but the members vote the board. I'd like to do an ISA model too, because the cooperative structure limits. If somebody want to write more than a £20,000 cheque, they're limited, and you can't pay out free cash flow. You can only pay out profits, and because you're doing quite an aggressive depreciation of the asset, you don't get much profit in the early years in a cooperative structure. So in this Westmill cooperative, we're doing a share buyback and a dividend flow, because with just a dividend flow, it's 1.8% in the early years, rises to a nutty 30-odd% in the last years. But I've been trying to make it so that the returns profile is 6, 7, 8, 9, rather than sort of 1, then 9, then 16. So you have to do share redemption in a cooperative structure if you want to fairly share the cash flows coming out of the solar park. In Westmill, if not, we had £4 million trapped in the not being able to pay out under cooperative rules. So it's just got to be large for that in the COP structure. But it's a lovely. A lot of the people that you saw in the pictures coming to Westmill on Saturday were cooperative shareholders in the wind farm that was adjacent. And it was oversubscribed, so we just touched wood that we might be.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed again. We've got to thanks to give my colleague Paul Nicky Ross from Royal Bank of Scotland is going to say something as a way of thanks and give a token. I just want to say rather sanctimoniously that we've just invested as a family in a turbine in the local river in Marple. And we have solar panels on the roof and a wood-burning stove in the lounge. So, I'm feeling this is quite appropriate and in good company here. So, anyway, we have a vote of thanks, and then there are drinks in the foyer and some food, so we can continue talking there. Paul.
I'll sit down.
I know you can stand up.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll be very brief because I'm conscious there's a fighting chance it'll still be sunny outside. As Richard said, I'm from the Royal Bank of Scotland. I noticed this is the Yorkshire Bank Lecture Theatre, which probably explains why all the IT is still working. As one final point, Richard, I went to Leeds University. I graduated in 1999, and since then I've worked for an accountancy firm and a bank. I believe law is part of the business school now, so that probably tells you where some of the business school graduates are going. Certainly not entrepreneurs yet. The bank has sponsored these lectures for a reasonable amount of time now, and we're happy to do so. We enjoy it. We like to do what we can in terms of sponsoring the kind of local education infrastructure and local business. I was chatting to Mark outside before, and he was a little bit nervous that what he was going to say today was going to be perhaps uninteresting or perhaps wouldn't grab the audience. I think we can agree that he was probably wrong there. So I've certainly enjoyed it. I know from some of the stuff that I've worked on, there are a lot of challenges in trying to fund renewable energy products. It is very difficult to raise the funding. There are a lot of projects that don't get off the ground, be it for technological reasons, be it for planning permission. So full of admiration for the work that Mark does. We have a very small token of thanks here, which was organised by the university, Mark.
You're very kind. Thank you very much.
But no, thank you. Thank you very much.